the case of the lead masks. On August 20th, 1966, a boy flying a kite found the bodies of two Brazilian men in Rio de Janeiro. Both men were dressed in suits, wearing waterproof coats and lead masks similar to those you'd typically wear to protect against radiation. Discovered alongside their grass-covered bodies on Vintém Hill were 2 towels, an empty water bottle, and a notebook. 3 days earlier, the 2 men had departed Campos dos Goitacazes with a large amount of cash on hand, claiming their trip was to buy supplies and a car. As more information about the men surfaced, it was revealed they were electronic technicians and scientific spiritualists, with interests in both ghosts and extraterrestrials. In the hours leading up to their deaths, Miguel José Viana and Manuel de Cruz stopped at a bar for water. A waitress, the last person to see them alive, would later tell authorities that both seemed in quite the hurry, especially Viana, who kept checking his watch. It seems there was a reason for this. When authorities inspected the pair's notebook, they discovered the following note: 1630 be at agreed place, 1830 swallow capsules, after effect protect metals wait for mask signal. To this day, the cause of death remains unknown. The Sodder family fire. On Christmas Eve of 1945, the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, went up in flames. While both parents and 4 of the children made it out, 5 children were still inside. George tried to rescue his children, but was hindered at every turn. The phone wasn't working, the ladder was missing from its normal spot, and George's truck would not start. One of the Sodder children who made it out raced to a neighbor's house to call emergency services. Tragically, the fire department was low on able-bodied men due to World War II. They didn't arrive until the following day, by which point the Sodder home was a smoldering wreck. Authorities determined an electrical fire caused the blaze despite George recently having the Wearing Readoni and the local electric company stating it was safe. Strangely, the remains of the children did not turn up in wreckage. Investigators suggested the fire was so hot, it burned up the bodies. Circumstances leading up the house fire only complicated the mystery. George was a vocal critic of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, to the distaste of local Italian community. In the days before the fire, the Sodders were visited by 2 men, a life insurance salesman and a man seeking work, both of whom warned Sodder to be careful of his home catching on fire. In the wake of the fire, it was discovered the Sodder family's phone line had actually been cut, and the latter was discarded at the base of a nearby embankment. Reports then came in of seeing the 5 Sodder children the next day at a diner. Years later, Sodder matriarch Jenny received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photo of a grown man who looked just like one of her missing sons with his name written on the back. The Springfield Three. 3 women mysteriously vanished from a home in Springfield, Missouri, sometime between the night of June 6th and morning of June 7th, 1992. After a night of graduation party hopping, 19-year-old Suzanne Streeter and 18-year-old Stacy McCall headed to a friend's to crash. After deciding it was too crowded, the 2 returned to Streeter's house, where her mother, Cheryl Elizabeth Levitt, awaited. When friends stopped by early next morning to pick up the girls for a planned water park trip, all 3 women were gone. Everything in the house was seemingly untouched: purses, keys, neatly folded clothing. The single thing out of place was a broken glass lampshade for the porch light, which the boyfriend of one of Streeter's friends swept away. In December of 1992, an anonymous tipster phoned the America's Most Wanted hotline claiming they had information about these potential unsolved murders. The caller promptly hung up before they could be transferred to authorities. In 1997, imprisoned convicted kidnapper, robber, and Florida murder suspect Robert Craig Cox told journalists the women had been murdered and buried, never to be recovered. However, there were inconsistencies in his claims that made it difficult to determine whether he was providing false statements. Investigators also received a tip claiming the women were buried under the foundations of a local hospital parking lot. When a crime reporter and mechanical engineer scanned a corner of the lot with ground-penetrating radar, they found the presence of 3 anomalies consistent with a gravesite location. Springfield's police department stated that because the scans were not conclusive, digging up the concrete was not justified. The troubling reappearance of Nicholas Barclay. In this unsolved mystery case involving a real-life changeling, 13-year-old Nicholas Barclay disappeared on June 13, 1994, from his San Antonio neighborhood after a day of playing basketball with friends. Nicholas was the youngest of 3 kids and had a history of getting in trouble. He skipped school, got violent with his family, and even ran away. On the day of his disappearance, he called home to get a ride, but his mother was sleeping, and his brother refused to wake her. Nicholas never made it home that day and was never heard from again. At least, not the actual Nicholas. 3 years after his disappearance, the Barclay family received a call from a boy claiming to be their missing son. He was all the way in Spain, after having been reportedly kidnapped and sold into a European slavery ring. The Barclays were overjoyed, but as soon as Nicholas exited his plane, it became clear that something was wrong. Nicholas looked nothing like the boy who had disappeared 3 years ago. The imposter claimed his abductors chemically changed his eye and hair color, but he also spoke with a thick French accent. While a local TV crew was filming the family, a private investigator working on the production began digging around and found photos that proved physical dissimilarities. The FBI was soon involved, and after running the imposter's fingerprints and a DNA test, they uncovered he was 23-year-old Frédéric Pierre Bourdin, a serial imposter who assumed close to 500 identities, including 3 missing children. In 1998, Bourdin would plead guilty to passport fraud and perjury, spending 6 years in prison. The real Nicholas Barclay remains missing to this day.
If you enjoy the video, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to support us, share it to your bestie.